There are over 6,500 languages spoken around the globe today. Sadly, some of the most fascinating languages in the world are generally pretty unknown, because we ourselves need only a few languages to manage our lives as we want to. In this video, we'll discover 5 languages that you might not have heard of, but which are really fascinating and worth looking at. This unique language is spoken on a small island called La Gomera, just west of Tenerife. The language itself is as interesting and as magical as the environment where the language was created. Now, what makes Silbo Gomero very different is that it's entirely made up of whistling sounds. Now, this might sound funny, but it's actually quite useful because the language was created to allow communication in up to 3 kilometers in mountainous terrain. Precisely this usefulness, especially for outdoor workers, has helped the language survive until today. Now, in a nutshell, the Silbo Gomero language is basically Spanish transposed into whistling sounds. Now, unfortunately, the language started losing its popularity in the 60s. Since the language was mainly used by the working class, many wanted to distance themselves from this specific language as they wanted to raise on the socioeconomic ladder. Today, on the other hand, the Silbo Gomero language is protected fiercely on the La Gomera Islands, and people hold it as a cultural value, which it is.
Kio estas Esperanto? Zamenhof en la deknaŭa jarcento kreis tiun ĉi artefaritan lingvon, kiu estas mia denaska lingvo. Denaska signifas ke miaj gepatroj ambaŭ, fakte, parolis al mi la lingvon ekde mia naskiĝo.
Now, about 2 million people around the world speak the Esperanto language, so you might be wondering, why did we include this language into the list of most unique languages? The main reason is that Esperanto is fascinating because it's a constructed language. Namely, a Polish person called Zamenhof invented this language between 1873 and 1887 with the goal to create an universal language so that people could communicate with each other more easily. And the higher mission of the language altogether is to improve communication between humans, countries, governments, to avoid war altogether. Now, to make a language easily learnable, you can't make it up from scratch. It would be too difficult. So it is based heavily in the Indo-European languages, borrowing vocabulary from the Germanic languages and from Romance languages, while most of its grammar structure is borrowed from Slavic languages. In the 1920s, the Esperanto language gained some popularity, but was quickly and effectively squashed by authoritarian regimes because they were afraid that the language might be leveraged for resistance. And although Esperanto didn't achieve its goal of becoming worldwide, and English is still the lingua franca, it's for sure a fascinating language to discover. Now, this language is extremely unique because most of its vocabulary, around 82%, starts with a clicking sound. And in total, there are around 80 to 160 different variations of clicking. Can you imagine? Now, most speakers of this language live in Botswana, but a few hundred live in Namibia as well. And this rich language is believed to contain the most phonemes of any language spoken today. Phonemes are basically sounds that distinguish one word from the other. So the more phonemes, the more different sounds in a language.
Kaixo danoi, zelan zauze belorrek? Neure uzena entru da eta Amerikarrenaz. Zehatzagu Kaliforniakoa. Haintxe, Euskal Amerikar askoagoz eta geure alkarteak.
Basque language is kind of a mystery. It's spoken in the Basque country in the northern part of Spain. Now, what makes this language a mystery is that researchers can't agree on where this language comes from. And indeed, this language is in the middle of linguistic powerhouses like Spanish and French, but it doesn't remind us any of those languages. Now, there are many theories about it, and the most popular being that the Basque language is the last survivor of a larger language group that used to exist, and that once covered most of Western Europe.
Bakkas,
Bakkas, Bakkas,
Askarit, Dabkas,
Dabkas, Dabkas,
Bahas,
Bahas, Bahas,
Frici, Akis.
Akis, Akis.
Now, this language is spoken by the Archi people in southern Dagestan in Russia. And this language is unusual because from a single verb root, you can mathematically derive hundreds and thousands of different forms. And I know it's difficult to even understand how it could be possible, but it's good to know because it makes you thankful of how simple languages like French, Spanish, and German are compared to some of these very unique languages. It's also interesting to note that for the longest time, there was no written form of the Archi language. Only in 2006, quite recently, there was a Cyrillic alphabet created for the Archi language.